Good evening. For most of you, it's evening. It's morning for us here in Europe. Thank you very much for joining us for this online roundtable on restorative justice pedagogy. This event is jointly hosted by the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime and the Law Department of Maynooth University. My name is Wendy O'Brien. I work at UNODC in Vienna on the Education for Justice initiative, and I also work in the field of violence against children at UNODC. I'll speak further in a moment about how our work at UNODC fits in with the session today and what has brought us to host this event in conjunction with Maynooth University. But before doing so, I'd like to just briefly introduce the colleagues that are co-hosting this session with me. And you would no doubt be aware of the lead role that Dr. Ian Marder from the Law Department at Maynooth University has played in bringing us together today. So my thanks to Ian for his initiative and his hard work on this. And we're also fortunate to be joined by my colleague, Ms. Jamie Lee, who leads on our work at UNODC on restorative justice. And Jamie will speak further on this shortly. So my thanks to Jamie as well. And we extend our thanks to you for joining us. We're delighted that you have done so. And it might be useful if I provide a little background to the sessions that we are convening. This is one of 3 online roundtables that are cross-regional in nature. And this particular session brings together more than 20 academics from Asia Pacific region. And we have 2 additional roundtables scheduled for academics that are teaching in the Americas and another that covers Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. And this approach has been chosen because it allows us to negotiate international time zones, but also because keeping an intimate setting gives us a sense of a round table and allows sufficient time for meaningful exchange. Because our intention indeed is to facilitate meaningful exchange on restorative justice. And this is because your experience in teaching, scholarship and practice brings a richness to our understanding of restorative justice. So I'm looking forward very much to a session that I think will be both rigorous and really motivating, inspirational, really an opportunity for us to share together. So before commencing the roundtable proper, please allow me to just take a moment to share with you information on the Education for Justice initiative at UNODC. And to do so, I will share my screen so that I can show you a presentation. Apologies that this will take me one moment.
Screenshot level.
There we are. I'm hopeful that you can see the screen.
Yep.
So the global program for the implementation of the Doha Declaration, the work that I am undertaking on Education for Justice, sits within this broader program. To give you the background on that, at the close of the 13th Crime Congress in 2015, the Doha Declaration was adopted. This was a unique moment when the focus on the interconnections between crime prevention, quality education, and the development agenda held the world's centre stage. So the Doha Declaration is something of a roadmap on how it is that we can advance crime prevention and criminal justice approaches that uphold human rights. In 2016, with funding from the state of Qatar, UNODC embarked on a global program that has 4 pillars, and you can see these on the screen. Education for Justice, which I'll speak about in slightly more detail, a project on judicial integrity, a project on youth crime prevention through sports, and a range of initiatives globally on prisoner rehabilitation. And I won't have time to talk about the remaining 3 pillars, although of course they are of interest, I think, to the group today, but there's information on those on our website. The Education for Justice initiative, the first pillar of the program, is a global education project to help educators at the primary, secondary and tertiary levels promote a global understanding of the values that underpin the goals that we have collectively striven to uphold in the Sustainable Development Agenda, but also doing so through underscoring the importance of human rights and the rule of law. So this is an innovative global education project that's seeking to equip educators with the tools and the skills and the capacities, the information in some cases, that they need to enhance their teaching on these topics. So at the primary level, for example, we have developed an animation series with characters that very gently teach our youngest children about the values of fairness, integrity, respect. At the tertiary level, of course, we don't take this sort of basic building blocks approach, but we have developed a range of modules across 9 thematic areas that are freely available on our website for academics to download or simply view and to use to enhance their teaching. The approach that we have taken is very much a partnerships approach. So these modules have been written by academics. They have been peer-reviewed by academics. UNODC has facilitated this process in a partnership that we see as being a strengths-based approach to enhancing global teaching. So you can see the 9 thematic areas there: integrity and ethics, anti-corruption, crime prevention and criminal justice, organised crime, trafficking in persons, firearms, and so on. The 9 thematic areas are mentioned there. On the right, I've provided just a brief sketch of what each module contains. So of course, as academics, you know how to teach very well, and this is why we have gathered today, so that you can share that expertise among one another and that we can benefit from that as well. The modules that we have produced are very full. So the reason that we provide a very extensive introduction, a section on learning outcomes, a lengthy section, 20 to 40 pages, that explicates the key issues on that topic, that looks at contemporary literature, situates that according to the international legal framework. The reason that we have done this is that we are hoping with this module series to reach educators that are not already experts on the given topic. So for example, we have a module on restorative justice, and I think this was mentioned in the email, and I will certainly follow up after this to share the link with you. You are most welcome to use that module in your teaching in whatever way you like. Use one tiny part, use none of it at all, share it with as many of your colleagues around the world as you like. But the fact is that this module was not designed for restorative justice pedagogy experts, which you are. It was designed to attract the interest of, for example, criminologists who may not be so interested in restorative justice or may not know so much about it. So it explains the issues from A to Z, provides a sense of a potted history of restorative justice as well. And this is something that runs across the full module series, is that they are intending to be multidisciplinary, both in the way that they are written and the academics that we have had involved in the writing of them, but also interdisciplinary in their appeal. And the reason that we have taken this approach is that we recognise that the problems that are facing the contemporary world, that very often end up being problems that sit within the criminal justice system, they're complex problems and they require multi-sectoral responses and multi-sectoral understandings. And the intention here is to educate the next generation of justice practitioners, and I say justice practitioners rather than criminal justice practitioners, but to educate that next generation about human rights-based approaches to some of these challenges. So I will end with my final slide, which is simply to list there for you the 14 modules that we do have on crime prevention and criminal justice. This is the series that I have been involved with. I am also an academic. I'm affiliated with Deakin University in Australia in the criminology department, and so I have been working closely on the development of this series, and you will see there, number 8, our module on restorative justice. But it might be that you would also have interest in, or you may know colleagues who would have an interest in our modules on justice for victims, for example, or violence against children, justice for children. Of course, there are really engaging questions around the use of restorative justice for children. There are really engaging questions around the use of restorative justice with respect to Module 9 too, violence against women. Of course, these are really large conversations, and I don't intend on sparking those debates in this forum, but I look forward very much to hearing from you, from your experiential point of view and your practice in restorative justice pedagogy. And I extend my thanks again to Ian, who will take the lead in convening the sharing circle once we commence with that. And you will hear very little from me in the remainder of this session, but I will be in touch with you afterwards by email to explore possibilities for us to continue a collaboration in regards to the Education for Justice initiative. So thank you for your patience and your attention, and I would like now to pass the floor to my colleague, Jamie Lee.
Hello? Can everyone hear me?
Yeah, just waiting for Wendy's screen to be unshared.
Okay.
Oh, but maybe I can do that manually from here. Yeah, there we go. So
Okay, great.
now you can share yours.
So everyone can see me. It's just to confirm everyone can see me and hear me, right?
Yep.
Okay. So hi everyone. Good afternoon to most of you. Like Wendy introduced, my name is Jamie Lee. I'm a crime prevention and criminal justice officer working in the justice section, where we help member states have a more effective, fair, and humane criminal justice system. And my areas of focus are to promote non-custodial measures, alternatives to imprisonment, and also restorative justice. And today I wanted to share the exciting news that the handbook on UNODC, the UNODC handbook on restorative justice programs will be launched next week. So the handbook on restorative justice programs is actually, it already exists. There's a first edition that was published in 2006. But as you know, the field has gone through a significant development and expansion in both the use of restorative justice and the scope of its use. So in 2017, member states had requested the UN and specifically UNODC to update the practical guidance that's provided in the handbook. And we have undertook this task through an expert group meeting, first in Ottawa and then again in Bangkok last year, to develop a draft and then also to seek inputs from the experts in the field to reflect as comprehensive and up-to-date information as possible. And now the handbook is finally ready. And it was due to be launched several weeks ago at the Crime Congress, which is a very big conference of criminal justice experts and member states around the world. But of course, given the situation, it was canceled. My plan was to share the handbook on screen, but my internet connection is unfortunately not strong enough to support that on my computer. So let me just share with you some of the new materials that you can find in the new handbook. The handbook contains updated guidance on several aspects of restorative justice that was identified as needing practical guidance by member states, by experts in the field. And they include explanation and more information on key concepts of restorative justice, because it was it was raised and observed by many experts that there was now a more nuanced understanding of some of those concepts than there had been in early 2000s from the expanded use and scope of restorative justice. And the handbook also includes restorative justice responses to serious crime, which was not so much used back in the early 2000s. And this is, of course, where we have some more information that Wendy mentioned, the delicate concerns that one must pay attention to in using restorative justice in gender-based violence. There's also a whole new chapter on promoting safe and meaningful engagement of victims as part of the success criteria for successful operation of restorative justice programs. And then there is a newly made emphasis on how to raise awareness and access to restorative justice programs, because there being restorative justice programs and it being readily accessible is a different story, as you know. And the plan for the handbook now is to be used as a tool when we review and support member states in their legislative reforms, to have to promote using it effectively instead of indiscriminately, and to also serve as a manual for other criminal justice experts to establish and implement the programs in their countries, and also to provide comprehensive and up-to-date information to policymakers, criminal justice practitioners, and other stakeholders. Currently, the handbook is available only in English, but we are also now seeking ways to have the handbook translated into as many languages as possible. So I just wanted to use this opportunity to ask you to please contact me if you're in a position to assist with the translation into one of the official, unofficial languages. And I haven't shared the date and time yet. The handbook will actually be launched on next Friday on the 22nd of May at 2 p.m. in Central European time, which in Bangkok it will be 7 o'clock. So depending on where you're located in the Asia Pacific region, it will be in the evening time. So thank you so much, and for the opportunity to share this information. And I hope you can join the launch event. And I wish you a very successful deliberation today. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Jamie. And thank you so much to Wendy and Jamie from the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, and also to Education for Justice for providing a platform for these very important discussions. As Wendy said, I'm a criminologist, and my main area of research and teaching are in restorative justice. I teach here in Ireland. You may know that there are many conversations on restorative justice research and practice, and much fewer on its education. But this is now a burgeoning area of scholarship, and it's great that E4J includes restorative justice as a module, and also is willing to collaborate on these roundtables, because they are intended to enable higher education professionals from around the world to discuss the teaching of restorative justice and restorative practices in universities. So the theme of today's roundtable is restorative justice education in the Asia Pacific region. We'll focus on teaching restorative justice in universities in Eastern and post-colonial settings, not least in light of efforts to take a more global and holistic approach to teaching criminology and other cognate disciplines. I'm delighted that we have people from a wide range of jurisdictions, including Singapore, Australia, Nepal, China, Hong Kong and Macau, India, New Zealand, South Korea, and Japan. So with such a diverse group participating today, we should have, I hope, a very valuable and fruitful conversation ahead indeed. So the first conversation I'd like to have relates to the criticism, or perhaps observation, that like any other subject in the social sciences, criminology is a rather American and European-centric discipline. And so my question to you all is, to what extent do you think that restorative justice as a discipline suffers from the same problem? Would anyone like to speak first in relation to that? By show of hands or in the comments?
Ian, I would
Oh
like
yeah,
to
Viva.
speak. Yeah, actually, when you spoke about like criminology is not getting that kind of platform in certain countries such as Asia, or in comparison to how it has gained momentum, you know, in European countries, restorative justice suffers from the same. Look, in India, we did have a restorative justice system in the form of like panchayat system and all that. We did try to solve civil problems, but when it comes to criminal matters and when it comes to teaching about how to use restorative justice for criminal matters to the students, yeah, there are students who are very job oriented. They prefer a job oriented subjects. So in India, since we do not have, you know, we do have ADR, alternate dispute resolution for civil matters, we don't have restorative justice for criminal matters, not even for minor offenses. So yes, this becomes a problem. Definitely a restorative justice system is very interesting, but there are students who would prefer more, especially the law student would be more interested in tax laws and all that, rather than going for restorative justice system. And then again, there are questions they always raise is, can they be an alternative to punishment? Because in law, they feed you so much about that punishment is the main objective of the law, you know, to punish the criminal as much as, you know, because he deserves to be punished. We don't focus more on reformation, and reformation through restorative justice is something, it's far beyond imagination for them. So that's all I wanted to add. So that also becomes a problem to motivate students to pick up this subject, because they don't really see where this restorative justice will go, especially in India. Thank you.
Viva. And Harry, did you want to come in on that? I know that you've written about decolonizing criminology. So maybe you could touch a little bit on, you know, what that might mean for, what that means in terms of criminology, and what that might mean for restorative justice as well.
Yeah, I'm just on.
No, you were already unmuted there. So flip it back. Yeah, there you go. Perfect.
Good. Yeah, good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, and thank you, Ian and Wendy, Jamie, for the kind invitation to speak, to listen in and speak this afternoon. My name's Harry Blagg. I'm Professor of Criminology at the University of Western Australia, and I've been involved, well, probably over the last 20 so years in research and debate about restorative justice. The particular context in which I work in Western Australia is that there's a massive overrepresentation of Indigenous peoples in the criminal justice system, and that has informed and influenced the way that I think that we think about criminology, the criminal justice system, restorative justice, very much through a post-colonial lens, that these are practices and ideas which are largely Eurocentric, American ideas. There's always been I think, sort of a fantasy that restorative justice is an Indigenous practice, and I think the research and the record now suggests that's not the case. It's a very European construct. And it in itself forms part often of a quite colonizing form of justice for Indigenous peoples. And we've yet to find a method in Australia that really, I think, meets the needs of Indigenous people in a full sense of the term. Perhaps the closest might be New Zealand, where I think the focus is far less on victim offender mediation and shaming and all those other effects, which very much part of the Australian model for a while, and much more focused on empowering Indigenous people and problem solving. You know, this is particularly necessary since in our own research, we found over the last few years that many of the indigenous people, indigenous youth in particular, who come into contact with the criminal justice system have some kind of cognitive disability, including fetal alcohol spectrum disorders. In fact, there's a research project done a couple of years ago in the main detention centre in Perth, Western Australia, Banksia Hill Detention Centre, which found that over 90% of the young people in there had some kind of quite severe cognitive disability, and roughly 40% had fetal alcohol spectrum disorders. Now, the other thing that perhaps you should know is that in states like Western Australia, Aboriginal youth constitute around 4% of the youth population, but are 80% of all the kids in custody. In the Northern Territory, all the children in custody are Indigenous, are Aboriginal. So this, you know, we see this as very much a colonial system of justice that, and is also massively inappropriate for youths who have some kind of cognitive disability, because, you know, you can't have those interactions, that the learning experience that people talk about has been so important about restorative justice, the input of the victim, all of these kind of things that we associate with a good conference are impossible for these particular cohorts of young people. So we're looking at a decolonized restorative justice, which says, okay, you know, we don't have all the answers. We can't lead in a sense of providing all of the answers to these problems. And we have to work in partnership with marginalized communities, particularly Indigenous communities, because they have their own law and they have their own cultures. And it's not like restorative justice. It's very different. So in order for restorative justice to have a role, I think, in countries like Australia in dealing with the Indigenous population, then that has to be part of a decolonising process where Aboriginal people are empowered and resourced to run their own versions of the justice system rather than a white justice system. And where it's in partnership with a range of other decolonising practices like decolonising pedagogy, reframing the teaching of law and restorative justice from an Indigenous perspective. So having Indigenous people involved as trainers, involved as people who convene conferences, all of these kind of things become very important. In our law school, we're having a decolonising our curriculum process, which is being extremely successful. And I think all of these things need to be taken together. I don't think you can just pick out RJ, restorative justice, from some kind of American handbook and then impose it in an unmediated fashion on people who suffered for a couple of hundred years of colonization by our justice system, which has been used as a tool of dispossession.
But if I can ask, Harry, what you talk about the decolonizing pedagogy process, what does that mean in practice for criminology and perhaps restorative justice curricula, if you don't mind me asking?
Right. Well, it means a number of things. Well, first off, we need to introduce decolonized literature. You know, criminology, we've just produced a book talking about this very thing. Criminology literature, you know, we have these, you know, European founding fathers and these great American male, usually male, kind of criminologists. And decolonizing means bringing into the discussion a lot of that post-colonial and decolonizing literature. I get my students to read Frantz Fanon and some of the great Indian writers, you know, Hamid Baba and the post-colonial theorists. We get them to look at decolonizing literature from South America, people like D'Souza Santos and Walter Manolo and others who provide a really good critique of Western epistemology, you know, the way that we've assumed that all our methods are scientific, rigorous, value-free, and all of these kind of things have been shown to be untrue, that they're actually very partial and support a particular kind of worldview. So as part of our work there, we have Indigenous people who come in and talk to the students and who look at the kind of things we do in our curriculum and they critique them. And we, through our centre, we've been able to bring in a lot of really impressive Indigenous scholars who've been part of critique. They've critiqued everything from our, you know, domestic family violence courses through to restorative justice and other, you know, one of my colleagues there mentioned alternative dispute resolution, and that's another area that's been kind of like critiqued from a decolonizing stance. So what we're doing is challenging European and mainstream knowledge systems and saying that Indigenous people produce knowledge. Yes, the same with people in India and South America produce local knowledge. And that is where you need to start in order to build a kind of credible restorative justice process. You know, in Australia, RJ, restorative justice, comes into Aboriginal communities on the back of a wagon train of different kinds of laws, policies, practices. It hasn't grown organically from within these communities. Yes, there's overlap, and they can, you know, we should be having a conversation, but we can't assume that restorative justice can lead that conversation always. It's got to be have a bit of humility and be prepared to kind of stand back and say, what do you want? What do Aboriginal people want to see? How do you want to see these problems addressed in your communities, like family violence and crime of various kinds? And so that's the way that we've been looking at it.
No, thank you very much for that, Harry. And Professor Thilagaraj, you want to come in on that? And I'm sorry, we just can't hear you there. Oh, you're muted now. Maybe try and click it again, unmute yourself. Yeah, no, I'm sorry, you're unmuted, but unfortunately, I think your microphone isn't working. Maybe you could possibly type in your contribution into the comments and I'll read it out for the group. But while Thilagaraj is working on that, would anyone else like to come in on this idea of...
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, there we go. Yeah, we can hear you now.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. I'm so happy to participate in this. Actually, you are talking about the education, how restorative justice is part of the curriculum for the students. But I want to be not only precept, but the practice. What is there in our policies and what we teach the classes and how it is practiced in the informal mechanisms. So that let me go through that. I think you might have seen my book, Restorative Justice in India, a book published by Springer, and it brings out what is happening in India. At the outset, I would like to tell you what we teach in restorative justice. Of course, the restorative justice is the concept is widely used in Europe and US, but In India, as far as restorative justice, the remnants of restorative justice you find in the remote past, highly traditional society, where you will find still it is practiced in the form of panchayats, like panchayats, informally. This is at the grassroots level. At the same time, it is also formalized. If you see the thing, uh, uh, we we teach restorative justice in the concept is alternative dispute resolutions. This is what we teach for law students as well as criminology students. So that alternative dispute resolutions at the two levels, the higher level, we have arbitrations. This is a dispute between the corporate and vendors and the people entering into contact. If any problems come, they are brought together and there is a negotiation that is then they settle the matter. It is completely under the Arbitration Act that we together. This is the one. The other side, we have Lok Adalat. Lok Adalat is a local court and mediation. This is another. Lok Adalat is widely used throughout the country. I was a part of the jury in the local Adalat in our Madras High Court. So that what we teach, what we find in the reality, I find hell of differences. Particularly people from the bottom level, there is a need for enhancing the practice of local Adalat. The problem in India is, the cases are piled up in lakhs and lakhs of courts, and there is another alternative. They have to go for alternative means, alternative dispute resolutions. There's a local adalat, it's called as a local court. Here, the local courts particularly concentrate more on victim compensation, particularly people at the bottom level that are unable to, for them, access to justice. For them, still it is a dream beyond a reality that is fulfilled by this local adalat, where the victim and uh, the offender and one of the judges. It is usually the Lok Adalats headed by the High Court judges along with uh, one senior lawyer. And in our Chennai, we luckily one of our judges, Justice A.P. Shah, who was the chairman of the Law Commission of India, made it like that there should be one more person in the local adalat, the local court. There should be a social scientist, criminologist, sociologist, social worker, psychologist. This is how he made it. That's why we get an opportunity, what is happening there and reality there. So that local adalat is, more on the accident, victims of road accidents and other such accident victims spending in the court for a long time. They brought here and there is a negotiation between the if it is the insurance party or if it is an offender, they are all negotiated. Finally, they said this is Lok Adalat. It is most of the cases and even some of the important cases of family problems also settled. And there is also mediation centers. This is attached with the court. Here again, the family problems, most of the problems are settled through mediation. There is a psychologist. And these are the practices. It is not completely formalized. It is partially formalized, but so friendly, bringing together the victim, offender, the practitioners together and taking the opinion of the offender, the victim, and they say the matter. This is how it is happening. But for this, we have a National Legal Services Authority. Legal Services Authority is the highest body at the national level, and it has a state level legal services authority. attached with the High Court of each state. And one part of this legal services authority is providing free legal aid to people who are unable, who will get access to have a lawyer, an advocate, an attorney. This is how they practice. Sometimes, this look adalat, even the video conferencing also, they conduct to expedite the process of dispensing justice through the video conferencing. We could get a very good result. A number of cases have come down a great extent. This is how. And at the bottom level, we have the panchayat. We have the panchayat. Panchayat means 5 people. This is the grassroots level and the village level. There is an act originally was practiced in the villages for a long time. Still, it is informally practiced. But formally, though there is an act for this purpose, sometimes because of the obvious of the local leaders, it is not still it is not reached a full extent. This is the position, but there is informally it is going on. Not many the local level, the grassroots level, village level problems settled by this panchayat. That is the practice. This is one. This is how we teach in. We take the students. I don't know the practice in other parts of India. We take the students as a part of their curriculum to participate in the look at what is happening there. Similarly, the family courts where mediation is going on, and they have projects also. And even one of my students here research on mediation also recently. And this is the position, but I think we have to do a lot on restorative justice, particularly people at the grassroots level to whom access to justice is. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. And Upneet, do you want to come in on that?
Hello?
Just unmute yourself there, Upneet.
I am unable to hear it.
Yeah. Good afternoon and good morning to everyone. I'll just be very brief in terms of 2 things connected to the colonization part. I guess India is also a country of contradictions since our criminal justice system is colonial in structure. Our laws, everything are based on what the Britishers gave to us. Our language used is also European-centric. And in terms of us accepting certain practices which come from the West, we easily imbibe those compared to something that we think is tradition-based. Panchayati system, we will think it's not something that goes with our criminal justice system. So over a period of time, what has happened is that the language used in the courts is something which is not used by the common person. And obviously, since the students are going to be functioning in a system where the language used, everything is European-centric, is colonial in structure, there's a vested interest in picking up issues and subjects which give them the jobs and the opportunities easily compared to something harking to the traditional point. Now, there's been a recent movement in terms of going back to our roots. So as far as the, let's say, medical treatment is concerned, we are quite enthusiastic in embracing Ayurveda or something. But in terms of looking at our justice issues, we are a little bit hesitant in looking at those practices. Professor Tilagraj mentioned about, yes, we have a lot of emphasis on alternate dispute resolution. A lot of emphasis has been made on mediation, right by the courts, and the judiciary has been emphasizing because of the burden. What has happened is that the conflicts have been taken over by the courts. So our courts are extremely burdened with a lot of cases, all conflict ridden. And now here was an opportunity for us in India to tap into that potential that when you're training mediators, now we look at restorative justice. I think a turnover took place after Nirbhaya, the gang rape, that the emphasis shifted to victims in the criminal justice system. And that's when we started looking at victimology perspective as justice for victims, what exactly that means. And this is where the alternate voices now are being heard, whether it is justice for women victims of crime or justice for children. And this is where that everybody will not, and where research and engaging in a language which percolates with different thoughts, what is justice at the end of the day, where it need not be totally retributive, it could be restorative. And that's what I felt. I mean, so local language, as mentioned by Harry, I mean, that's also important out here. Tribal communities do not have the recourse, or would not like to go into the court system. So that's where we need to respect and imbibe the local knowledge into the legal system as well.
And what about for your curricula? What are the implications of that for your university curricula?
So the implications will be that, you need to develop the local resources in terms of literature. It would not just have to be centric towards a particular city life, but since the rural-urban divide is really strong, so the rural divide, I mean, the rural people, they would solve it much more easily. So putting that part and looking at the initiatives that have started slowly building up in India, we need to put those into the curriculum. We need to put those practices which are already happening and which we are finding are leading to, let's say, lok adalats, if they are leading to effectiveness, we put that into the curriculum. We put all those good practices into the curriculum, and we develop, and we need to research on those aspects, that this is a model which is more strength-based compared to the other model. And I think then it would be much more sensible, and it will convince the policymakers also.
Thank you, Upneet. And Latha, you wanted to come in on that?
Yes, yeah. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for this opportunity. It's actually a good start because always there is a dilemma that whether we need to look restorative justice as a part of criminology or a separate entity from criminology. So we have a lot of dilemma going on there. And there is some set of people who started talking about reparative justice, moving away from restorative justice also. In fact, we had a lecture 2 weeks before in Madras University, where people started telling that now no more restorative justice, we talk about reparative justice. But I feel that we have a lot to do with restorative justice. Professor Tilakaraj and Upneet explained very clearly what is the situation of restorative justice in India. I can say, like, regarding the pedagogy or education, what is happening in India so far in the universities are, we have introduced one paper in the master's degree in criminology in some of the universities as restorative justice practices. Of course, John has given a lot of impact in India. He had visited here, John Braithwaite, he had visited here quite a few times, and he had spoken about restorative justice. And practically, India is doing a lot on restorative justice. Bringing that to education is that what we are trying to do now. So what we do, we have introduced one paper in the universities where we bring the best practices of RJ in India and other countries. And we also make our researchers, that is our PhD and MPhil researchers, to go to the field and try establishing restorative justice practice. For example, in south of India or south of Tamil Nadu, we have a lot of communal clashes, communal conflicts. So what we try to do is, can we try to implement restorative justice practice in solving this communal conflict? So our researchers are working. So slowly, India is developing and bringing restorative justice in the pedagogy. And with the guideline which we can form now, I think we can make it more explicit. And Madras University is also trying to come out with a Center for Restorative Justice. So I think this will go a long way and we can contribute more.
Thank you for that, Latha. And I wonder if anyone would like to reflect on what we can all do to ensure that our curricula reflect the diversity of restorative justice. Does anyone have a view on that? Or perhaps there are elements of your curricula which reflect the countries in which you teach? Yes, Ram?
Good afternoon, everybody. Good morning also. I will, talk at length at the other aspects of this in this region, and also in Nepal. But what I would like to raise at the onset is that even when we do teaching about restorative justice in the universities, maybe we are not incorporating the values, the principles that RG would give. Say example, there was a paper, Restorative Justice, and many students failed. There was a fail, there was a pass, there was a punishment for students who submitted late. It's not just about the curriculum, but the way we are teaching, the way we're living by that curriculum in the universities, and the way we are trying to use the restorative justice as a value, as a living principle, not only as a subject. And then I also see a risk of, over-romanticizing restorative justice with the traditional indigenous local cultures, where we find that local cultures are similar, informal cultures are as punitive as the formal justice system. It's just that we might not have that enough data. We might have, selected some facts that, support our claims, but there are many examples where many communities have been very punitive. They are very violent. Many groups, there is a very strong power dynamics like we have in the formal systems. So the need to be cautious right at the beginning when we're trying to say we're localizing restorative justice. I just want to raise that need, that concern, and if we have time, we can discuss at length also. Thanks.
Thank you, Ram. And Arti, would you like to come in on that?
Yes, thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Aarti and I work on a restorative justice program in Delhi. So I'm a practitioner, but we also have taught at the Law University. So it's a designated course for restorative justice taught to final year law students. This is in Delhi. So I think something that helped us as we started our program design on restorative justice, we wanted to understand what people think about restorative justice in India. So we worked with communities, especially people who had been harmed, victims of violence, people who had suffered domestic violence, and we asked them what their perception on justice was. So when we came out with that study, we used that as part of our curriculum in the course as well. So that gave an additional buy-in to what restorative justice looks like in India. It's something that's coming from the voices of victims, people who have been harmed, and it's not necessarily just exporting an outside system and putting it into India. I completely agree with Ram when he said that there's a risk of over-romanticizing indigenous practices, because I think that risk exists here, because we've tried to look at a lot of indigenous practices as a lot of my colleagues before said that, we have lok adalats and we have the panchayati systems. But the thing is, they lack a lot of intersectionality. So there's a very fine balance between really trying to decolonize by taking in indigenous practices, but also giving into the harm that these practices have perpetuated over the years. So when we did the course in the Law University, what we did was, we did the process as very experiential, and we used restorative values during the class as well. So we had circle processes and we used all of that. And I think that just created space for discussion more organically. It brought to life the values. So we had a more value focused discussion rather than just focusing solely on practices. Thank you.
Thank you, Arti. And Haley, you want to come in? And then Miranda, I see you. I'll come to you after.
Hi, everyone. I'm Haley Farah. I'm in New Zealand at the Victoria University of Wellington. I appreciate and wanted to reiterate kind of the similar fashion that Arti and Ram were going in, which with your question, Ian, about how do we incorporate this into our curricula, I think that there's a risk of always considering restorative justice as a process or as a mechanism rather than as a value or as having a set of guiding principles. And just like in a restorative justice case where we're looking at repairing harm, and then the repair of that harm can be creative and meeting the needs of those participating, that's exactly how we need to be teaching it, which is what are we actually looking at? What are the problems we're trying to solve? What are the needs that exist within this community? And then what is this community's response to meeting those needs? That might be a sit down with the people most involved that looks very much like a victim offender mediation in even a script, but it might not. It might look like something different. And I think that that's the only way that you can be culturally responsive while teaching a practice like restorative justice, is to say, here's what it's about. Now, how would you best apply that in your context with your people in these situations? But I think that we can teach that exactly the same way that you're talking about, RT, around actually doing that as we're learning. So here's what it is, I think that pedagogically, it demands that it's an inherently reflective practice. And so it's an inherently reflective thing to learn. You have to be doing a lot of inward work, I guess, and really looking at why are we making these choices, rather than saying, well, I don't like the colonial retributive system, so here's a restorative system. This is the intention, is to repair the harm and find justice in the ways that we're defining justice. And now what system do we need to design to get to that, rather than the mechanism itself?
Thanks, Haley. And if I just may say quickly, I've got Haley's new book here, which is very, very good. Can't recommend it highly enough. Miranda, no problem. Miranda, would you like to come in on that?
Thanks very much. And I'd like to say that I've just ordered your book, Haley, so I'm really excited to read it. Thank you very much for writing that. We actually, sorry, I'm Miranda Forsyth. I'm at the School of Regulation and Global Governance at the ANU, Australian National University. And so I'm just new to teaching restorative justice. And actually, I mostly work in Pacific Island countries. And I've really focused on looking at the interactions between customary Christian and state ways of resolving conflict of all different sorts. And I've found that introducing the language of restorative justice can be a useful way of getting a dialogue about, well, what are some of the more retributive and some of the more relational aspects of those different systems, and which ones are working well for communities and how do they need to be balanced and supported. So in thinking of restorative justice as a way of critiquing both Western justice systems, but then and also offering alternatives has been quite useful in dealing with issues like gender-based violence. But in terms of our course, we actually designed it. This is to answer your question, Ian. We've called it Restorative Justice in the World, and so we specifically have units about, okay, what does restorative justice look like in terms of peacemaking? So we look at Northern Ireland. What does it look like in the Pacific? Obviously, because I'm interested in that. What does it look like in Asia? And so we get the students to really engage with restorative justice in these different contexts, and we try as much as possible to use literature that's written by people from those particular contexts.
No, that's great, and I think that's a good point on which to end this discussion and move on to the next one, because I think one thing that Miranda mentioned that reflects what everyone else has been saying is that part of the value of restorative justice as a concept is that it's an ideal type. It's an ideal type in the sense that you can use it as a theoretical piece, as almost a rhetorical piece, to show students or help students reflect on different types of justice. Not that those necessarily exist in that clear dichotomous way in reality, but simply to help people reflect on, well, what would it if justice was defined in this way, or what would it look like in this way? And I like to, in my first class on restorative justice theory, where I introduced Zer's restorative retributive dichotomy, I explained that this is best seen as an ideal type, and not to pretend that this can exist in such a clear way in reality, but just to use as a way to think about things. And indeed, I use that to explain what an ideal type is as well, because the students haven't always had huge amounts of sociological instruction. But if I may just turn to Masahiro then, because you and I, Masa, we set up an email list to enable people to share their curricula. Based on your experience of that email list and also what people have spoken about today, what do you see as the benefits of international sharing of this kind?
Hi everyone, I'm Masahiro Suzuki. I'm originally from Japan, but I work as a lecturer in criminology at Central Queensland University, Australia. Probably I should first give you the context of this email list. So the Ian founded the Facebook group called Community something, but which has more than 1,000 members now. And I was designing the RJ unit for the first time in my life for my teaching at university. And I have no idea how to develop my curriculum. So I decided to post my question to ask for sharing the existing curriculum of RJ. And several RJ people were happy to share the curriculum with me. So we have decided to create this email list so that everyone can share their RJ curricula. So far, I think more than 10 or 20 people share their curriculum, their syllabus in this email list. And what I found beneficial is that it shows a basic framework of teaching of RJ in higher education. For example, so what should be covered when teaching RJ in higher education? I mean, what is a core element of when you teach RJ in higher education? And I found that most of the curriculum start with the origin and the concept of RJ and what RJ is, and then move on to why RJ is important for victims and offenders in terms of meeting their needs, such as accountability and their voice being heard. And what I also found interesting is that most of them use the circle method when teaching RJ, especially to facilitate discussion among the students to talk about the problem and advantages of RJ. But I think the challenge in this email list is that almost all the syllabus is written in English, so we cannot have syllabus written in other than English. And if I relate this email list to today's topic about RJ pedagogy for higher education, I look forward to hearing how the RJ scholars, RJ teachers teach RJ in Asia Pacific region, how they teach RJ in their localized way, for example, in Asia or like Hong Kong and China. That's what I found in this email list.
Thank you very much, Masa. And I just want to, oh yeah, Dennis, please.
Yeah, perhaps, I could talk about RJ by adding the Chinese cultural contextual background. When we talk about RJ, we must talk about mediation in the Chinese setting, because mediation is more popular than the concept of RJ. By means of mediation in China, it has been developing for a long history. There are all kinds of mediation in society, from the village level, from the community level, or even from the provincial level. And there are also different kinds of mediation, for example, family mediation, neighborhood mediation, criminal mediation, and also judicial mediation, and so on. So that's why, when we are promoting RJ in Macau, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and mainland China, we have to differentiate what are the major differences between Chinese mediation and the so-called RJ concepts. Interestingly, this is not easy to do because, as Harry Black has just mentioned, RJ has a lot of colonial background. And that's why, when we introduce the concept of RJ, it's a little bit Western. Definitely, we will talk about the RJ development in New Zealand, in Australia, and this may be, a little bit relating to Oriental culture. But definitely, the use of wordings are mostly English. And interestingly, let me tell you, when we brought in RJ, all the video, all the media episodes are in English. And that's why in the early days, nearly 15 years ago, when I brought in RJ to Hong Kong and Macau, we have to translate all the subtitles from English into Chinese so that, the trainee can understand, what it's all about from the video or from the stories. And that was really hard work for us. But so far, we have done our best. I focus in Hong Kong first. In Hong Kong, we have already been set up some kind of NGO, non-governmental organizations, which is focusing in promoting RJ to the community and to schools. We've been advocating the use of RJ in a lot of schools, primary schools, secondary schools, and sometimes tertiary education settings. And then that would be rather useful for resolving school bullying cases. And we have also done some of the effectiveness research before and after to measure the impact of RJ on reducing bullying. And we got some positive results in that area. And we also, at this moment, promoting the use of RJ for couple conflicts. Louis Mock, the other representative from Hong Kong, is an expert in this area. Louis learned something from Taiwan, and Taiwan adopt RJ for resolving couple conflicts, interpersonal conflicts, quite in a mature way. So I also visit Taiwan for a few times and then learn from the Taiwan scholars and RJ practitioners, and they have done a very good job in those. And that's why, RJ has been promoted in using in schools, in family mediations, and we are now promoting RJ in community as well. We do work with some of the mediator who are running radio program every week, and then they are selling the concept of community mediation and RJ, so that we are promoting the RJ ideas, the paradigm shift, not just the mechanism, not just the process. But for tertiary education, at this moment, I'm coming from City University of Hong Kong teaching criminology. We don't have a course title as RJ. I just name it as conflict management and mediation. Conflict management and mediation. Then in 13 weeks, in a total of 13 weeks, we spend half of the time to promote RJ, talks about different models of RJ, the New Zealand model, Australian model, Canada model, and so on. And then we also mentioned about RJ development in Asia, in Thailand, Japan, Singapore, and some other places as well. We compare and contrast. And at this moment, we are doing our best, but RJ is not easily incorporated into the CJ system in Hong Kong because of the traditional British colonial systems has been adopted in Hong Kong for many, many years. And all the bureaucrats are a little bit traditional in this, and they think RJ is too lenient. But we are trying our best to show that, RJ is not indeed a lenient way, but, we would like the offenders to face the victims, to face what they have been doing wrong, and then repair the harm done is not easy at all. So and that's all from my sharing at this moment. Thank you, Ian.
Thank you, Dennis. And that brings us on well to the next conversation I think we could have, which is about the location of restorative justice in our curricula. So what Dennis shared there was that the module is called conflict management, mediation, which is interesting because when you were speaking about your research on schools, I was wondering, you know, how to integrate that kind of learning into a restorative justice module in the criminology context. I teach to criminology students, and I find that while I make time for restorative practices and for theoretical arguments, which maybe do not relate directly to the justice system, I don't always manage to find time to teach about restorative justice in non-criminal justice contexts, such as maybe schools or social work. So if I may turn then to Tom Noakes-Duncan, who I know has a graduate certificate in restorative practices. Could you please tell us a little bit about how that came about and what that includes?
Sure. Well, tēnā koutou, everyone. So my name's Tom Noakes-Duncan, and I teach at Te Heranga Waka, which is the Victoria University of Wellington in New Zealand. So I teach into a graduate certificate of restorative justice practice, which consists of 4 courses at a kind of 300 level, which is kind of 3rd year undergraduate level. And we deliver this in a kind of blended learning environment so that people around the country can be with us in the classroom through things like this on Zoom. And it usually takes our students something like 2 years to complete the course in a kind of part-time capacity. To provide a little bit of context of how we got this off the ground, back in 2013, a partnership was formed between my university and several different government agencies, which led to funding to set up what we call a chair in restorative justice, which is somewhat, or it's evolved somewhat into a kind of research and practice excellence hub, which we have academics and practitioners and consultants kind of all working on various projects, but also kind of research, evaluations and teaching. Now, when this was set up, it was decided to locate this kind of set of activities within the School of Business and Government, rather than in the School of Criminology or Law. And part of the reason behind this is that we have, as our kind of government partners in this, agencies that represent education, accident compensation, the business community, justice, corrections, police, and so many kind of hosts of parties and interests in wanting us to think about kind of various innovative ways in which restorative practices and justice approaches would intersect with their own work, and that they would ideally send some of their workers and practitioners to us to be able to learn. This has been challenging to, I think, get off the ground. We have set up the course in a way that has tried to appeal to quite a broad audience of people. So rather than taking people through as an undergraduate kind of criminology course where there's a really set curricula, we're really trying to expose them to the many ways in which restorative practices are intersecting in New Zealand society. And we frame our teaching all around this idea that restorative justice has evolved into a social movement. And so what kinds of internal tensions are there within this movement? What are the kind of critical issues we're facing that cross over into these many different domains? And so we kind of teach at a kind of theoretical level on that front, but we try and expose them as much as possible to the different practice domains. So we have a lot of people coming into our courses who are practitioners or probation officers or police workers, and telling them about how they are integrating the kind of restorative set of ideas within their own practice, and what that means for kind of mainstreaming practice throughout the whole system, whether that be our justice system, our education system, our health system, and so on. So it's still work in progress for us. We get a lot of enthusiasts who stay for some time, and then they kind of capture the restorative genius and then move on. Others find this as a bit of a launching pad for their own kind of careers in terms of pivoting from traditional practice and how they might have approached, say, something like probation, to really thinking about it in a whole new light and staying with us through the duration of their studies. So that's a little bit of just how that came to be. Yeah.
Thank you, Tom. And I know that there are many scholars among us who struggle to convince their universities of the merits of teaching restorative justice and struggle to integrate it into curricula. Those of you who've experienced this, I wonder if you might share the main challenges you found. Perhaps Upneet or Xiaoyu? Yeah, Upneet?
Yes. Yeah. I think the main challenge is first bringing about awareness. And since I deal with not just law departments, but also being a psychologist. So in psychology, it's easier when we're talking about conflict resolution and conflict management to have that topic introduced. And that just gives me an idea, you know, in India, we've been focusing more on the criminology and the legal studies that restorative justice could be taught out there. But it's a subject, when we talk in terms of RJ values and in terms of the methods. So it's something that could be a part of even in sociology. And I found it easier to introduce it in the Masters in Police Administration. When we're talking about practitioners, so it's easy to deal with them compared to just hardcore in terms of law, legal education. And also, I think that one bit is in terms of awareness, and of course, it's a work in progress. And what we have seen is also that our system hasn't worked and telling them where it has failed. So the innovative ideas, once they get to know that here is restorative policing, this is a practice which is happening in different countries, that gets the bit of excitement worked out. And once they start trying it, and then you start questioning the different ways, and that makes it easier to introduce the subject in as such.
Thank you. And Xiaoyu, would you like to come in on that? You're just on mute there. Xiaoyu, could you just unmute yourself? Thank you.
Okay, yes. Hi, yeah. Based on what I have learned today, I think IGA touches many aspects of social system and legal system in a given country. So therefore, in terms of teaching RJ in a higher education context, the topic of RJ can actually be covered in a range of courses such as victimology, penology, conflict resolution, or even criminal procedure law, etc. I just offer some of my personal observations and reflections on why RJ is not an independent course yet. In the first place, I think it relates to the development of criminology as a discipline. In mainland China, the law schools and policing colleges at various levels have opened criminological courses to students. However, they are not popular courses as compared to law courses. The latter secures students the skills of passing bar exams so that they could remain in legal profession. The criminological training is lacking for students. Moreover, the teaching staff are mostly trained with law background. Therefore, if we admit that there is still a long way to go for the development of criminology in mainland China, it is not surprising that the RJ course still remains a virgin land. And also, I actually believe that the efforts from a community of scholars and practitioners are crucial for promoting RJ. Or RJ pedagogy. Currently, there is a lack of consensus of what we can do with RJ. And also the receptiveness of RJ is not high among practitioners. Therefore, perhaps there needs convincing evidence showing that RJ helps preventing crime and helps building harmonious social environment. However, this requires more research and more collaboration. With more visibility and enhanced awareness, there will be good prospect of the future that we will see or we would expect to see. So that's just my personal reflection on that. In terms of the teaching of RJ. Thanks.
Thank you, Xiaoyu. And Latha, you wanted to come in on that? Just unmute yourself, Latha.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, so your question was like, what is the challenge we face in introducing RJ, a separate discipline or a paper? See, no, there are so many challenges, but the main challenge which we feel here in India and maybe should be in other countries also is the job opportunities. The moment we introduce one subject in a particular discipline, or if we want to introduce one degree at university level, the questions posed by the authorities and by the students and by everyone is like, what are the job opportunities, especially in the government sector? So we are finding it difficult. Of course, criminology had this difficulty, but now we have overcome with a lot of other supplement papers and knowledge. But with RJ, that is one major challenge which we face, that what are the potential job opportunities in government sector and also in private sector where people can earn at least in par with other disciplines.
Thank you, Latha. And just moving on to the next topic then, I think the current crisis, it's fair to say, has accelerated a move towards online teaching. And it seems likely that this will play a greater role going forward. And I know that Hayley Farrar from New Zealand designed and delivered an edX course on restorative practices. Hayley, I wonder if you might tell us a little bit about your experience of that and whether there are some key learnings for those of us who have now had to move our teaching online. I know certainly I have had to do that in my restorative justice module.
Yeah, I'd say Tom and I did that together along with a pretty large team of people, actually. And I think that the edX platform is particularly interesting because it is a MOOC, so it's a massive online open course, which means that we had 2,000 students, which is atypical of a normal RJ course. And so I think there's some learnings that would be applicable to a normal university course, and there's a lot that wouldn't be, just because of the nature of the size of that. I think that I mean, I'd invite Tom to comment on this as well, because he designed it with me. But the creation of the content was a very large job. Filming the videos involved a team of IT staff and professionals at the university. There were quite a lot of people that helped build the course. So it was really more of a team of 8. And so it was quite a gigantic undertaking to be able to offer a course of that size. And I'd say that with a fewer number of students, we would probably pick different tools or techniques. For what we sought to achieve through that, I thought it was pretty good. I was proud of what we accomplished with that, particularly for introductory theoretical material. One of the real limitations is, of course, with a course of that size and a course that's online, there was minimal, if not like zero, ability to form relationships and connections, not only with the students ourselves, but also amongst each other. We discussed the idea of breakout groups or whatnot, but we didn't have the moderation capabilities of that. So I think that I mean, the content is free online and available, open source, so you're more than welcome to use those videos and to take what you'd like from that course, and I'd encourage you to do that. But other than that, I don't know if there were a ton of lessons that I would say would be applicable to a normal teaching environment, except for to be very prepared for how much work it is to create one of those MOOCs.
Thanks, Hayley. Tom, I don't know if you want to follow up on that, maybe anything to do with the design of the materials or anything like that?
I mean, as Hayley is alluding to, I mean, it was probably 3 to 4 times the amount of filming and editing per kind of hour of content that you could use. So, I mean, you kind of need to have a whole film crew ready to do that kind of delivery. I mean, you could scale that right down in terms of the quality, but kind of designing the content, again, it was largely kind of mirrored on how we teach in our university courses. So we went around the different kind of domains in which restorative practices have emerged within New Zealand, at least, and sought to interview people who are at the kind of leading edge of that kind of work. So really getting them to explain how they got a kind of restorative approach off the ground within, say, their secondary school or within the police force and their kind of culture change efforts. So it's a kind of exposing people to the kind of set of questions or ideas that force social change within kind of various organizations. And that's kind of what we were trying to achieve for the course, kind of raising questions more than pedagogical instruction necessarily.
Thanks, Tom. I'm gonna, oh yeah, Miranda. Yep, Miranda.
Sorry, I just wanted to ask a question. I'm really interested in that, and it sounds like a fantastic resource that I'm looking forward to watching. But you were talking about getting restorative justice off the ground. But what I've been seeing is that often it will get off the ground, but then how does it continue? How is it sustained once that initial impetus and excitement and maybe the champion moves on? And I'm wondering if that was something that was covered at all in your curriculum as well.
Haley or Tom, would you like to come in on that? Tom?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, the kind of, so it's the kind of sustaining of that kind of effort. And so, you know, lots of people did talk about that it's kind of it's been an intergenerational kind of shift in some ways, that how they've kind of built a sense of kind of culture change within their organizations. So most people didn't kind of refer to restore in the kind of course that we developed. Most people didn't really kind of refer to restorative practice or restorative justice as just a set kind of program or a kind of mechanism. They very much saw it as a way of kind of creating a different kind of culture or a different way of working or a different approach to relationships and people. And so it was about how they embedded that over time. So we did kind of talk a lot about, you know, the kind of bottom up and top down kind of issues. How do you get your kind of leaders involved? How do you raise kind of the right sets of questions and sustain those kind of questions over time? So, I mean, yeah, that was kind of what we were hoping people would see. And again, that's why we framed it around this idea of a social movement, as having kind of early beginnings in the kind of bubbling up of some ideas, but then how does that kind of create more sustainable social change over time? So yeah, that was our intent.
Thanks, Tom. And I'd just like to move on then to our final topic, which is about what higher education and the teaching of students can learn from the training of practitioners in restorative justice. So for that, I'd like to turn firstly to Razwana and then to Ram, both of whom have experience of training. For example, Razwana trained probation practitioners for a long time and now will be developing university curriculum. So how are you bringing that training experience to the classroom, Razwana?
Okay, thank you, everyone. Hello, everyone. I basically, maybe a very quick overview. My name is Razwana. I work with the Singapore University of Social Sciences. And prior to this, I was a probation officer. I was working with the ministry for about 19 years. So in that course of my work with the ministry, we worked with the state court, youth court, as well as the home team, which is the police officers. So when we were doing our training, initially, of course, we had to get the buy-in from all these different stakeholders when we initially introduced restorative practices. Our criminal justice system, like, you know, the counterparts from India and elsewhere, we took the model from the British, and it's mainly focused on crime control. So it's a little bit hard to push for a restorative model at the beginning. This was maybe about 18 years ago. But subsequently, there was a move, there was a shift with the changes that we had with our Chief Justice, you know, a lot more, you know, affluent behavior from the public, asking for more, you know, support for the offenders, the ex-offenders and all that. So the court shifted a little bit and then we shifted with them. Of course, the probation department was in a very right place to train the probation officers, to implement restorative practices. But we were not able to do that like how they did it in New Zealand, Australia, at the onset within the context of the court system itself, because it's got no implication on the outcome of a sentence. If they would go through what we had, a Project HEAL, we had this family group conferencing, but in the end, the judges make the decision, and it has no implication on the sentencing per se. But within the probation itself, what we were able to do was to train our officers to be able to look at what will be the implication of not resolving this issue with our offenders. So again, being probation service, we were not working with victims because that will be a conflict of interest, in the way that we do our work. So we were trying to look at our offenders, how to prevent them from offending again, and looking at that, we felt that okay, restorative justice kind of helped restore not just the harm that they have done to the victim when we do victim impact exercises and all that, but it also helps them look at their own, upbringing, lifestyle and all, and look at what was the harm that was caused to them. So we felt that resolving that harm within themselves can actually help them be more socially responsible. So the training that we did, eventually, of course, we were able to influence the courts, we were able to influence a little bit about the police, and now I'm in a very good space because the degree that I'm developing right now, it's a brand new degree called Public Safety and Security, and it's together with the Ministry of Home Affairs. It's a course that the ministry wants all their home team personnel to be trained in certain areas. It's very multidisciplinary. I'm not getting purely academics to come in and teach. I have a track for the prison officers. I have a track for the civil defense. I have a track for the police officers, but they are all practitioners who are coming in to teach. So that makes, make it easier for the students to be able to kind of accept the fact that, they'll be learning this from the practitioner's perspective. So what I've done with restorative justice as a course, I've parked it under the criminology track, but again, this is a degree in public safety and security. It is with the School of Humanities and Behavioral Science. It's not with the School of Law, so it's different there, and at the same time, we kind of have this, working relationship with the ministries, and that's where it's easier for them to look at it. Okay, if I do this course, I can still get a job in any of these areas. So my experience really is to, in order for you to push for something like this at the university setting is to really start with the different stakeholders. What I have done now is all my curriculum is kind of co-created with the ministry, right? So the ministry comes in and then they give me the input. They have their own home team academy, which they train their police, personnel and all that. They look at what are we, developing, and then we work together on the curriculum, we work together on the topics that would be relevant, and then we try to get in practitioners to come in and teach the course itself. So by doing that, it's a lot easier. The other thing that I wanted to highlight with regards to values-based type of teaching and also practice. When I was doing my PhD, I did my PhD on restorative justice in corporate crime. So one of the things that I've noted, because I spoke with practitioners or leaders in organizations that are based in Singapore, I realized that most of them were men, but they all had this common shared value system, which is part of Confucius' value system. They were all, Chinese male. There was one Indian guy, but in general, they were all, Chinese men who believed in Buddhism and Confucius teaching, and they all had shared values and this belief about wanting to help the community in general. So the other aspect, as a teacher, because prior to that, I was teaching all the law subjects and organizational behavior and contract law. Okay, so one of the things, okay, I'm trying to see if I can get my audio to work. Is it better now? No. I've been talking, and can everybody hear me?
Yeah, just about. Just try to be brief, and we'll move on. It's okay. Thanks, Razwana.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So basically, maybe I should just conclude.
Yeah.
But
that is better now. That is better now.
Oh, okay. All right, great. So basically, I just wanted to conclude by saying that as practitioners of restorative justice, you can actually bring this in many different, classes that you teach. I teach the criminal justice system and rehab for the social work students, and I try to bring this in by doing simple things like, doing the circles at the beginning and doing a check-in and check-out. I teach organizational behavior for the business school, and part of it is conflict resolution, part of it is how you deal with employees, how do you deal with their morale and all that. You can bring in your restorative beliefs and practices in there as well. So as practitioners, I think it's a lot easier to go into the university setting and try to see how you could bring in for mediation, conflict resolution, and also teach restorative justice as it is on its own. It took a long time. It took almost 15, 16 years for us to be where we are now, but there are progress moving forward.
Thank you, Razwana. And Ram?
Hi. On the same questions?
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me introduce myself again. I work for Nepal Forum for Restorative Justice and also teach at the university. See, on the experiences related to developing curriculum, I work with the formal justice system, like with the judges, team of the judges, which was one of the beginnings of Nepal's move towards restorative justice in the formal justice systems. And then in the university, where we have RJ-like and also RJ, explicitly RJ curricula at the bachelor's and master's levels, mostly in the schools of law. And then working with community CSOs, like NGOs, which also work with many issues of conflicts and crimes and harms related to many other areas, like the post-conflict needs, the issues related to domestic violence and so on. And very recently into the anti-trafficking, especially the victims and survivors' needs for justice and so on. In terms of similarities, I think that there is a need. I mean, there is a tendency of looking for alternatives, a fresh approach of trying to solve issues or trying to look at the world that we are in. So in the universities and in the communities, in the practitioners, there is this need to look for alternatives where they have been using the same framework to address certain issues like the crimes or violence and harms, and they've not been able to solve them. So they're looking for different approaches, and that's where they find restorative justice. And actually, this is how restorative justice enter into our into our conversations in judicial and the non-judicial settings. So there is this similarity, of course, and but I think there are more differences than similarities, I would say. Judges and formal justice officials, want to use this as one of their one expansion of one of their roles. So one of the experiences we had early on was that judges want to become facilitators. So they wanted to have more extended opportunities for them, when they retire or when they want to experiment something different inside the court or judicial premises. And they started considering that when people outside of the justice system were talking about justice, it was a challenge, or it was a loss of their space. We were trying to control, or we were trying to get in their space, and that is how the resistance was seen in the beginning. In the university setting, like Lata was saying, there is this the question of job prospect. What does RJ will lead us? When it's a very competitive world. We have to look for certain lucrative returns when we have invested this much of money in years in universities. So where do we get that? So we have not really moved a lot forward in the universities, I would say. In communities where we're doing the RJ work and developing RJ manuals and curricula and using that, there is where we have found a lot of acceptance and buy-in. And that is, I think, because they're very close to the problem, so they know what their needs are, and it doesn't look like it's a professionalization of what we're trying to do. So most of our work in the RJ community-based, most of our work in communities does not explicitly mention RJ, but we tend to do the RJ discussion without mentioning the name RJ, because it looks, again, very alien to the community we work in. And communities have really customized the RJ trainings and work we are doing. So, using that in community mediation, closely aligning RJ with community mediation, not necessarily, believing that RJ is another form of community mediation, but, something from which we can move towards RJ. Also, community practitioners trying to understand how RJ could help in, addressing harms or the needs of justice for the survivors of violence against women or gender-based violence. That's where they find RJ very relevant and salient, and that's where we also see a lot of acceptance. So now we see that in Nepal, there are three parallel developments where we see the community-based RJ has moved a long way, and then it's followed by judicial and the court systems, and then in the universities, unfortunately. But in these 10 odd years, I should say that this is a very exciting development in terms of teaching RJ, but also not only in terms of teaching RJ, but also using that in the laws, and then finally having a national law on RJ 2 years ago. So that is all these we're working sometimes in silos, sometimes in tandem, but we kind of see that a lot of things have happened in the last 10 years in Nepal. But I must say that my challenge still is to convince students or the lawyers who have invested a lot of money to come to work with our cause or this work, and that is have not been successful yet. So I'm always looking for inspirations from elsewhere. For communities, I'm very happy, very thrilled. With universities, not very.
Thank you very much for that, Ram. So I know there's one or two people have sent me a message saying they'd like to come in, but just for the purpose of time, I would like to move on now to doing a closing circle. And if there's another point you'd like to make, please feel free to share it then. But I'll just move on to the closing circle. And what I'm going to do in lieu of a talking piece, in lieu of us all being able to sit together and there being a clear order in which to speak, what I'll do is I'll just go around on my screen one by one, and I'll say your name. And if you'd like to reflect on one thing that you took from today, or potentially a piece of advice for someone developing a restorative justice curriculum for the first time, you're very welcome to share that at this point. I'd say maybe please try and take just about 30 seconds or so, if that's okay each, and that way we'll be able to close the session on time. So for me, what I took from today, I think, is that I need to set more readings from non-Western scholars. I think I'm pretty good at using examples from many countries, but I probably don't always set a lot of readings from other countries. So I definitely need to reflect on that and find something else to give my students. In terms of advice for developing curricula, I think one thing that I found really useful is not hitting them with all the theory at once. You hit them with sort of half the theory originally, then give them a bunch of practice, and then give them the more advanced theory later when they have something of a frame of reference to refer to. Now, that may not be the same for everyone, but I found that this year to be quite useful, and that they've been able to engage with advanced theory later in the course. And the other thing I'd say is videos of victims or offenders speaking about their experiences, much more beneficial than me trying to describe them. So I'll just go around now, and that way we'll definitely hear from everyone. So the first person on my screen is Teresa. And please remember to introduce yourself if you haven't already spoken.
Yes. Hello, everyone. First of all, it's my pleasure to be here with you today. My name is Teresa from the Faculty of Law, University of Macau. And I would like to say that I learned a lot from the several speeches from you today. First of all, one important remark is that while teaching restorative justice, we need to pay attention to the local community. We need to make sure that we are addressing our local community and the needs of our local community. It happens to me here in Macau. I just teach restorative justice in the bachelor degree. While I'm teaching criminal law, I introduce restorative justice, and I introduce my students about the solutions that we have in Macau and what we should have or could have in order to go further. On the other hand, I also like to highlight that we need to increase the level of awareness about restorative justice. As far as I understood until now, many people don't have a clear idea about what restorative justice is. So I think it's our task to improve the awareness about restorative justice. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. And Masahiro?
Hello again, everyone. So yes, so I have learned a lot of things from today. Because I established an email list with Ian, so my advice for those who are going to develop the RJ unit is not to hesitate, reach out for help, because RJ people are really friendly, so they are willing to offer help. And I found the Facebook group that Ian founded was really useful platform, so I strongly recommend to use that platform to share your syllabus or any other relevant ideas about RJ.
Edit?
Hello, everybody. My name is Edith Törzs, and I work for the European Forum for Restorative Justice. We are a mostly European focused network of restorative justice practitioners, researchers, and policymakers. But luckily, we have a lot of members among you as well, and we also try to be active in all the continents and develop relationships with everybody working on restorative justice matters. I think one aspect I find interesting and really important from my experience in Europe, at least, that we still struggle to implement restorative justice in the law curriculum. And as we work in criminal justice with many lawyers, I think that would be a really important step to get awareness among lawyers and also get some kind of support. And I find it really important, although I think a lot of work is to be done in that respect as well. And I would like to draw your attention to a database we have at the European Forum. We collect all restorative justice courses and we publish them on our website. So you can check on our website or just email Ian maybe information and he can pass it to me. If you want that your course appears on this database. Thank you so much, and I really enjoyed the conversation with you.
Thank you, Edith. And I would just note, I did actually look for that on the website, but I'm not sure if it made it in the transition to the new platform. But I would be happy to collect everyone's courses and share those with you, but just try to make sure it's up there. I'm not sure if it is at the moment.
It is there, maybe difficult.
It is there. Sorry, maybe I couldn't see it. My apologies. Could you send me the link to that and I'll share it with everyone after this? Thanks. Xiao Yu?
Yes, I'm Xiao Yu, and I forgot to mention that I'm currently working at the School of Criminal Justice at Shanghai University of Political Science and Law. And today is really stimulating conversation, and I've learned a lot what is happening in Asian Pacific regions. And in my previous teaching, I actually only had one module on restorative justice in the course of victimology. But now with today's conversation, I've learned how to expand my vision and also how to stimulate students in my future teaching. And also the second thing that I feel I'm inspired is perhaps I need to engage more with practitioners, not only in mainland China, but also in international context. So that to keep abreast of what is going on. And so I really enjoyed today's conversation, and thanks for such a great occasion. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. And Professor Thila Garaj? No, you have muted yourself there. I'd try to unmute there. Yeah, there you go. Yes, would you like to come in on that, Thilagaraj? Okay, just working on audio issues. I'll just say to Dr. Nurul Islam from Bangladesh, welcome. I'm sorry that we only have a few minutes left, but we were just going around to everyone and saying, if you had a piece of advice for those teaching restorative justice for the first time, what would that be? Would you like to come in on that?
Yes, yes. I am Dr. Nurul Islam from Bangladesh. Hello?
Yes, we can hear you, Nurul.
Oh. I am Nurul Islam from Bangladesh. Thank you for inviting me on your conversation.
Yes, please.
Basically, we introduced restorative justice in Bangladesh at Dhaka University at master's course. Master's is a higher education. It is related to victimology and restorative justice. Where restorative justice and victimology jointly introduce the syllabus and curriculum here. We introduced it's 2012, and about 500 graduates at master's level have been passed from this. We have so many courses here, 2 semesters in master's level, 22 first semester, and second semester 22. Total 44 courses I credit here, and about 10 courses we have included here. Only 3 courses included in here, restorative justice. The name of the courses, theories and contemporary issues related to restorative justice, and next restorative justice history and background, and restorative justice related research methodology, and others criminology and victim related courses here. We are very much interested to connect with you. Hello.
Hello.
Maybe interrupt here.
No, it's okay.
Have you heard to my conversation? Hello.
Yes, please continue, Nurul.
This is my short description of my courses, and only in this university or Dhaka University, under the Institute of Social Welfare and Research, this program is covered here. Just I know you. Are you Ian Murder?
Yes, that's right. Yeah. If you just had a piece of advice for people teaching restorative justice for the first time, that would be great.
Yes. My suggestion here, 2 suggestions basically. We have needed expertise personnel or expertise professor here. If the International Restorative Justice Association provides some, give the technological or theoretical assistance. And next, not only Dhaka University, more others university will be introduced here, and the government support is needed for that. Hello.
Thank you, Nurul. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll move on then to Thilagaraj. I think maybe you have hopefully picked your mic there. Unmute yourself, sorry. No? Yep. Perfect.
Hello.
Hello.
It's a nice conversation, Jan, and regarding higher education level, how to incorporate this restorative justice, I suggest that training the trainer, that's very important. Training the trainer on two parts. One is the training the teachers, the law colleges, universities, criminology, sociology, social work. The other level, the practitioners who are being practiced, for example, the probation officers, public prosecutors, so that the people who are in the field, they should be given training in the and initially, I would emphasize that as a teacher from the university, that many teachers, both in the criminology and many in the law universities colleges, may not know even the concept of restorative justice. That is a reality. So that my suggestion is we have to train the people, and thereby in turn they will teach the students. They will come out, and that kind of thing we have to make it. And we talk about RJ movement, restorative justice movement. My point is, it is restorative justice culture that is very, very important. That is what missing. We in criminology we talk about subculture of violence in certain pockets of the villages where the caste communal conflicts are more. There is a need for creating another culture of restorative justice where there is a need for practitioners. Need for practitioners in that area. That is, we can have them, and in turn that will minimize a country like ours, where day by day the communal violence, honor killing, these are all increasing day by day. The need for an effective restorative justice system, and it can be done only through training the trainers at the criminal justice level, and again the teachers in all these law colleges and universities. Thank you.
Thank you. And Viva? Viva, can you hear me? Yes, unmute yourself, Viva. There we go.
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, so shall I also talk on the same point that you just last spoke?
Just either a reflection on what you've learned from today, or one piece of advice you'd like to give to people developing curricula for the first time.
Okay. Thank you, Ayan, so much. I forgot to introduce myself last time when I spoke. I'm Dr. Vibha Hetu. I have taught restorative justice for 3 years, but otherwise I have been teaching criminology, victimology, penology, policing and law enforcement for last eight and a half years. And restorative justice I have taught for 3 years. And what I have learned today from everyone's speeches is, it's very important to focus on the language of the native people and how it influences, how do they put their own experiences of victimization, through their narratives. So that's very important that we need to focus, because it obviously would vary, especially in our countries such as India. It would vary from state to state, from region to region. So that's very important, I felt. And it's very, very important to involve community people, because restorative justice is not something which has to be limited to the university teaching. We have to work practically, on a gross level, going to people, meeting them and explain to them what this justice is all about. And when you talk about developing a curriculum, I think even during my teaching restorative justice to the students, I do conduct role plays and circle. So in role plays, we do victim offender mediation process. We conduct that victim offender mediation based on hypothetical cases, and where they keep practicing on that case for a while, and they put up questions and they try to feel, as if they are the victim. It means they're putting their they're putting themselves in the victim's skin to feel how the victimization might have affected the victim, and how it might have affected the offender as well as both the families of victim and offender. So regarding developing a curriculum, I would say, both the things have to be well balanced, theory as well as practical components of the course. That is very important. And I would like to thank all the participants, in this forum, that I really learned a lot about, how important restorative justice is, for learning, for day-to-day basis, in order to solve crimes, as well as, developing the curriculum, and making it better the lives of the common people. Thank you, everyone.
Latha?
Hi. So this is Dr. Lata from Madras University. I have, 22 years of experience in teaching and research in criminology. And I'm so excited to be a part of this meeting. So far, we didn't have any exclusive meeting on RJ, while we had a lot of forums, like you have your European forum, Indian forum, and we have forums in social media. But such kind of meeting is something exciting. So let us not stop this. We need to continue this to bring in, to bridge between the practice and the education. Like in India too, we have a lot of practices regarding RJ. We do have prison dialogues, we have victim offender mediation, universities also work, and researchers contribute a lot of researches on restorative justice these days. But we need to bridge everything together and develop a better education and pedagogy in RJ. I feel this is the need of the hour. So let us work together. And first step I can say is, why not we come out with an edited book on the best practices in RJ? I can say Asia, but it can be the whole of, the countries, whichever you wanted to involve. So we can bring the best practices in RJ in the respective countries, and we can circulate it along with the tools for teaching RJ in universities and curriculum. And now we discussed about a lot of challenges. So we can also list out lot of challenges. We can try to address those challenges through UNODC and other UN organizations, and this can be overcome for better teaching. So thank you for this opportunity, and let us keep meeting in this forum again to make a better world. Thank you, and stay safe.
Rezwana?
Okay, this was a great opportunity for me to learn from everyone. I'm really grateful. I'm about to start on my course development. I will be, it'll be very useful if anybody got any tips or anything to offer, or any, if you could share. I'm definitely going to take up some of the materials, as Wendy pointed out, from UNODC, and try to push, for some of those things to happen here in Singapore. Thank you, everyone.
Upneet, would you like to speak?
Yeah, thank you, Ayan. A very engaging session. It was a great opportunity to know what all is happening around Asia Pacific region. One important takeaway for me has been that it has to be interdisciplinary, it has to be cross-disciplinary. Teaching of RJ has not to be focused just on law or criminology aspect, but it could be done in other fields as well. So that's it's easier as well to create greater awareness amongst all. And bridging the gap between theory and practice, that's extremely important. In India, what we find that definitely the theoretical framework in teaching is easier, but in terms of having the practical aspect, I think it's extremely important, and I'm not sure whether are there any accredited programs for RJ facilitators. Now that could be a beginning. If we create an accredited program for facilitators in restorative justice, that could be one step forward. That could evoke interest, and that could be supplemented with all the efforts, whether we have trained mediators, let's have trained RJ facilitators as well. And that could be something that could help in, because we are still grappling with a whole lot of things. So that could provide an opportunity for a firm base as well, and push for a better world and a safer world. And I like the program on public safety and security that Razwan had mentioned in Singapore that she's introducing. So congratulations and all the best to you and everybody who's doing, and I look forward to the UNODC handbook. So those are resources that we become more aware of, that those are the things that are currently happening. Thanks.
Dennis? Dennis, would you like to? Dennis Wong from Hong Kong?
Yes, I'm I'm excited to be here because I learned a lot from all you guys. And I'm also so happy to see so many faces, old friends and new friends. And then nearly half of them I have met you recently and seen you from the Facebook and so on. So I just want to say that thank you for your sharing, and then I would like to connect with you through whatever way, for example, email or whatever way. And should you want to, get information from Hong Kong, Taiwan, Macau, and mainland China, please let me know. I'll try my best to help. Thank you.
Haley?
It's been very nice to connect with all of you and put some faces to some names for those of you that I've spoken with before, and to meet those of you that I haven't. The only extra advice that we haven't talked about that I would offer is that you can't simply teach restorative justice. You have to do it, and you have to participate in it, and it's the only way that your students can learn it. And so I think starting where you've got any kind of energy, we often think about rather than strategizing a restorative justice implementation, it's more about throwing seeds out and then watering whichever ones sprout. And so whatever you can find to work with, and for us, that was within the university, within a certain group or within a certain community. If there's a group of people saying, what does restorative justice mean for me? Going there and asking the questions and inviting the answers has been the most successful thing for us. And similarly, within a traditional education environment, starting with the students and their own personal experiences of justice and of what their world looks like for them as they go about their day-to-day activities has been the most effective in actually feeling like my students understand what I'm talking about. So the more opportunities for experience and for reflection, it also really reduces your workload as a teacher. There's not so many things you need to tell them as much as you need to hear from them. So that'd be my greatest advice. When in doubt, just ask more questions.
Archie?
Yes, thank you so much for this beautiful space. The takeaway that stands out for me right now is introducing more post-colonial literature as readings, and I think that's beautiful, just being more intentional about that. Sharing that really helped us in the course was having preliminary level facilitation skills taught during the course. So we did that through teaching tools and through language, communication, and we split that up. And I think that really helped because it gave students a way to really practice it, even in their own lives, of not really facilitating restorative justice in the criminal justice system, but just practicing communication, restorative communication, reflection, what that looked like. And I think that's pretty helpful because that kind of helps to bridge the practice and the theory gap. Thank you.
Ram?
Well, thank you for organizing this. Thank you, UNODC, and thank you all of you for your wisdom, for sharing your wisdom. It's an honor to be in this community as always. My takeaway would be that from the discussion, my takeaway would be that we have to keep working on whatever pursuits or whatever avenues we have. And completely echo Hallie Ferrar's point that let's begin somewhere, and let's keep the conversation going. And on a related note, we in Nepal organize every year a conference. We're just trying to rename the word event conference to make it less formal, institutionalized. So we organize annual Nepal conference on RJ, and we're organizing this towards the end of November. I don't know, there are difficulties in traveling for sure this year, but we can opt many other methods. So let's keep the momentum. That's all I want to say. And again, thank you all for your insights, and namaste.
Kata?
Yes, thank you, everyone. It was really nice hearing from all of you. I'm Kata Fodar. I didn't have a chance to introduce myself yet. I am currently designing a peace building course at the Singapore University of Social Sciences. And it was really exciting to listen to all of you, because I was looking for a way to sort of use RJ and go beyond the criminal justice system and sort of look at how it can, how I can use that in a peace building course, because of course peace building has a very strong focus on the structural sources of conflict and the structural sources of violence. So that's been pretty exciting, and I was very great to hear about, or be reminded by Haley about focusing on the guidelines and the values of restorative justice, and not think of it as a process, because I think that will be extremely helpful. As well as thinking about decolonizing the literature, the practice, and the processes. So all these will, I'm sure, play a great role in teaching peace building as well as conflict resolution and all the related subjects. So very exciting to hear that RJ is opening up beyond the field of criminal justice, and it was really good to see all of you. Thank you.
Rowan?
Hi, it's been so interesting. Obviously I'm doing my PhD in restorative justice teaching and pedagogy in criminology specifically, so it's been particularly interesting to me to hear about how it's being used in interdisciplinary ways, and maybe ways that might make it a more employability focus, or the problems that come with employability have been really important to what I've been looking at. So yeah, just thank you for letting me listen in, and it's been great to see you all and hear you all.
Lewis?
Hi, and thank you so much for offering your advice in incorporating RJ in your course. And I used to teach RJ in a course called Crime and Criminal Justice. So my advice is, because for the students who are new to RJ, they don't know how to position this a large paradigm into the justice system. So for me, I just try to relocate RJ in the later stage of my course, so that to let them know about, to compare about the traditional or conventional justice system. So my last advice is I would like to divide the module in a few sessions, like theory, principle, cultural compatibility, process, and lastly, most importantly, is about the practical skills. That is, for me, I used to share my experience in working with domestic violence, how to incorporate RJ in the domestic violence setting. So I just echo Haley's experience, that I usually will let them to have a role play exercise by playing a domestic violence video, and let them to think about the potential scope in developing RJ exercise and also RJ platform. And some of the students will act like victims and their supporter. Some of the students will act like abusers. So I will give them some debriefing after seeing the interactions. So I guess to incorporate the sense of the rest of justice spectrum, the practical skill sharing is most important. But lastly, thanks again for all your advice, and we have a good time in understanding restorative justice. Thank you.
And Wendy?
Thanks, Ian, and thanks very much to everyone. Honestly, I really think that it was a special session, and I'm really struck by the generosity with which you have shared on your own practice, and the generosity and commitment shown as you offer to share materials among one another. This really, I think, augurs well for the field of restorative justice, but also I think for this broader space in which I think restorative justice and the values, restorative values sit, which I think for me is about upholding human rights, human dignity, addressing the needs and rights of victims effectively, and ensuring equal access to justice for all. And, you know, we have such a long way to go globally before we can achieve these aims. But I think that it's really brilliant that we can come together in this really nice collective spirit to share on that. I'm really heartened by the really true interdisciplinarity that is in action here, and the really strategic thinking that is happening about how it is that restorative justice can be inserted into courses in different disciplines, not always in law and in criminology, where in some places this can be very difficult to have that. And my final, this is not advice, these are reflections. My final reflection is how powerful I think it has been to hear in different ways this same point coming up about the fact that we need to keep a very good eye on the imbrication between language, discourse and power. You know, the power effects of language, it's coming through really constantly in this group. And I think, you know, the first and really practical and quite easy and I think really productive step is, yes, of course, to ensure that the literature that we draw on comes from as many parts of the world as we can manage. And in that vein, I would invite you to send me, if you have them, articles that you recommend that we can cite in the Restorative Justice module that UNODC has produced, because this is a living document. This is something that we do want to update to ensure that it is as globally relevant as possible. So thank you once again, and I do hope that this is the start of our conversation. We keep that momentum going. Thank you very much once again, and thanks to Ian too.
Thanks, Wendy. So I'll close the roundtable now just by thanking Wendy one more time, the UNODC, and the Education for Justice Initiative for providing a platform for our conversation. So if you haven't done so already, please check out the E4J website, where you can find this wide range of materials and resources to help you develop your criminology and criminal justice curricula. If you have mentioned any articles or book chapters or links or anything today, please do send them across to myself and Wendy, and I can distribute these among the whole group. As I said, this will be published online, so you'll all receive the link also to this. Try and send them all across to me. I'll send it out in one batch, so you get as few emails from me as possible. For those of you watching the recording, if you found this useful, please let us know by emailing me on ian.marder@mu.ie, as I think we could organize more activities in this area if people find it to be of value. In the meantime, please continue to connect with each other, as it's the only way for us to maintain strong relationships and communities through this crisis. Thank you very much for everyone for participating today. I'm Ian Marder from Maynooth University in Ireland, and I wish you all the very best in your teaching and scholarship activities. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.